Hi Aussie Radfems, Kiwi Radfems and International Radfems. So this will be our 6th ever live stream. And if you go into the description, you will find a link to be able to come in and join me. And there's also another link in there that just has a very quick brief this week's news, what was going on in it. And I've only put the links in there for news articles to do with radical feminism or radical feminist issues or issues that radical feminists find of note. So while I'm waiting for people to join me, I'll just read out a few of the headlines. So a pediatrics professor is slamming a move to educate teachers about how to identify potential transgender students in their classrooms. So when I had a look at this, basically what they're trying to do is work out the, 1 in 1,000 kids that is transgender by looking at outward signs of how, what their interests are, whether they seem to fit with the stereotype or not. And to me, and I think a lot of people would find this a little bit worrisome, because when you're looking at the outer shell, the way in which somebody presents or the things that they're interested in, their likes and dislikes, it seems to be a little bit superficial, So if somebody, feels like they're in the wrong body, that is not gender dysphoria, it's body dysmorphia. And, this is the same thing as anorexics have, people who think that they are so ugly that they're hideous and nobody should want to look at them. There's a lot of different ways that body dysmorphia manifests. And I don't think you can tell by looking at somebody or by judging their interests as to who suffers from that and who doesn't. So I think it's a bit dangerous in some ways, because it could be that a teacher identifies a kid who's having troubles with any kind of part of their life and attributes it to gender rather than says, look, there's a kid with a bit of trouble going on. I wonder what's happening here and what I can do about it. So that's one of the things that's going on in Australia at the moment. Another one is Western Australia is considering leaving gender off birth certificates. Now, what they really mean by this is leaving sex off birth certificates. Now, that's dangerous. If you've got a medical emergency and there is no sex on the birth cert or on any ID, what do medical staff do to find out what sex you are, especially when we have people who have very convincing surgeries to pass as the opposite sex? And as you know, men and women respond to medications differently and have different signs and symptoms for certain illnesses. So again, this is like one of these ill thought through ideas, and really we do need to block Western Australia from doing this. And mostly for the safety aspect, but also because part of our society is collecting data and statistics to see who is marginalised and who is at risk of what, who's committing crimes, all of that kind of stuff. Right, now the next one on my list is, and I've written this a little bit sarcastically, but it says, millennial man babies whinge about work. Were they influenced by the right-wing sexist bullying of Julie Bishop? Now what this is really about is millennial men are saying that women are favoured at work, which, if you look at the statistic, it's absolute shit. women are not being favoured at work. We have never been favoured at work. What has actually happened, though, one of the statistics that I have seen is that more women are going to university than men are, and women are out earning men up until approximately the age of 25. And then men are out earning women, even when they have less qualifications. So a man who has not gone to uni will be earning more than a woman who has after the age of 25. So what we're talking about here is under 25-year-old men complaining that they're not earning as much as women when they haven't put in the same amount of effort in the first place. It's quite crazy. Okay, so in the UK, there was a statue of Anne Lister, and instead of having lesbian on there, it said gender non-conforming. So a whole heap of people, over 2,500 people, signed a petition, and so the snowflakes now have to wear this one because it is being changed. They're taking down the plaque and they are replacing it with an accurate descriptor, of her as being a lesbian in history, not a gender non-conforming woman in history. So that's a win in the UK, and I'm really glad to see that that's happened. Okay, so we have actually had a little win over here as well. Our right-wing government proposed that the pension age be raised from 67 to 70, and it's been scrapped because of the public outcry against this. And this is, I know they're going to start it again because this is what they did when the pension age used to be 65. They tried a number of times. It was passed, eventually, and they did that under the radar. And the way they did it was they said for anybody born, now what was it, 1969 or later, I believe is the date, though I would have to check that one. Will have to work until the age of 67, but anyone prior to that date, can retire at 65. So that's how they've got that one through. And this raise to 70 is the next thing they want to do because they're saying, they can't afford the pensions, there's not enough people paying for it, and et cetera, because it's now the baby boomers. And you've got Gen X, who are a tiny generation, and Gen Y having to pay in taxes for the baby boomers' pensions. Now, they're pretending they can't find the money in the coffers. Well, realistically, if they stop giving themselves raises and all of the benefits of, 16 times the dole in their, expenses, things like going out for dinner and having to get a plane somewhere or a private jet somewhere instead of, driving themselves and going to a cafe for lunch, then yes, they can find the money for the damn pension, So anyway, the next thing is a man called Stephen Peat brutally murdered his partner and her two children, and this was north of Adelaide in Hillier. And his non-parole period was increased by 6 years from his original sentencing because of public pressure, which got the prosecution to appeal the sentencing for a heavier penalty. And so I think they used it under the words manifestly inadequate. And there's no mention of public pressure behind the prosecution's appeal. It was just outright that, this prosecutor did this and won, getting another 6 years before this man is eligible for parole. And the descriptor of what he did to this mother and children is just, it's horrific. I'm not going to repeat it here, but the link is in the notes and you can read it there. Another murder, a 21-year-old man murdered a 73-year-old woman over renovations he'd done in her home. I've put in here, ever heard of small claims court piece of shit. But this 21-year-old, right, he goes in, he does renovations. The 73-year-old woman says, this wasn't done to what I asked. this bit's perfect, I'll pay for this, but this needs to be fixed. She didn't refuse to pay. She said, I want it done to what I asked for, which is kind of normal. And male violence, he couldn't handle his, being told that his work wasn't good enough, and murdered her. So we'll see what happens there. I don't know when the actual sentencing for that one is. I don't think it was in the article. And we've got the Victorian Police of now wearing riot gear and carrying non-lethal yet really painful weaponry. And it's all this new kind of capsicum bombs, things like that. And they've apparently been wanting to do this for about 3 years. And there was a situation where we had around 200 predominantly male youth just absolutely mobbing over in Collingwood, and they ran a car into pedestrians. And so this has been the excuse for Victorian Police to now actually use this riot gear and weaponry that they've never had before. And I do think it is just an excuse. As far as the actual crime is concerned, yeah, it was full on, but it's also something that is extremely unusual in Victoria. We don't have huge mobs rioting and a whole lot of violence on that level, on the mass level of 200 people on a regular basis. What we do have is we have more crimes of violence happening behind closed doors. And I say this after I've just heard gunshots outside my house, which was actually only about 40 minutes ago. And we had drive-by shooting here, I think it would have been 3 or 4 months ago. And so I'm guessing it's the same gang. Could be wrong, but, again, drive-by shootings in Australia, very unusual. So when it does happen, you usually know who it is and what it's about. So anyway, let's skip over to Nauru. The Secretary for Multicultural Affairs refused to grant approval for a severely traumatised female refugee and her brother to be transferred via air ambulance in violation of a federal court order. So this had gone to federal court. The federal court had said, yes, this woman is severely traumatised. She needs medical care and attention. She needs to be taken from Nauru over to Australia immediately. And Nauru, the Multicultural Affairs, the Secretary for Multicultural Affairs, outright point blank said, well, I don't believe this person's traumatised, and so no, we're not going to do it. And that means that both her and her brother are still actually in Nauru Detention Centre. Now, police found 3 trafficked women. This was women trafficked from Thailand and 1 pimp in a filthy apartment in Tasmania. And like usual, our media reports this as illegally working with an invalid visa and as non-registered sex workers. It's complete obfuscation. So they avoided the word traffickers, trafficking victim, pimp. They just absolutely whitewashed this as if it is women who wanted to be there, who came over illegally and decided they wanted to work in the sex trade. So they're most likely going to face prosecution and then deportation. Now, for those who don't understand the way Thailand operates, the way it works is when women go back there, if they have been charged, if they have sex trade offences, their family will not talk to them. Their community will not talk to them. They will not be able to get a job in the mainstream, and they will be trapped in the sex trade in Thailand, and that is where they're going to die. And this is what our government is doing to trafficked women over here. And our media is complicit in this, in the way that they're calling this non-registered sex workers and illegally working, rather than victims of an illegal sex trade. I mean, the whole sex trade should be illegal in some ways, but, in the terms of pimping and buying. But as it is in Australia, it's not. And When we have women who don't speak the language, they don't understand the culture, they didn't think that this is what they were going to do, we actually really need to come from a basis of not assuming anything, but instead bringing in interpreters, making sure they're in a safe space, asking what their needs actually are. Do they want to go home, or do they want to, get citizenship over here and go for asylum here? Yeah, because it depends on what they're going to go back to. Yeah, so let's get on to the next article of news. A woman was raped in Victoria, and this happened 33 years ago. Swabs were taken at the time, and at the time, they didn't have DNA testing. But we've had DNA testing over here for a long time now, just not 33 years ago. But it wasn't until 2014 that they got around to testing a rape kit. And she's now 77 years old. Her rapist has finally been caught. But in this media, again, they're not asking any of the relevant questions. Like, no one seems concerned. What has he been doing for the last 33 years? Because this guy broke into her home. He put a gag on her, and it wasn't just rape, it was torture as well. So it was a terrible ordeal. Now, a man like that does not do it once and never do it again. So, what has he been doing for the last 33 years? Where has he been, and how many other women has he victimized? These questions were not asked in the media. So anyway, sentencing for him is on September 14th. And I, for one, really want to know if he's guilty of other crimes as well, because I'd be shocked, absolutely shocked if he wasn't. More great news. We have a murderer in Canberra. This guy, he visited a brothel earlier that night, and for some strange reason, this is presented as somehow shocking in the media. And the media report also had to mention that he paid $70 for half an hour, as though this is somehow important information. We know the link between the sex trade and violence is extremely high. We already know this. And this was the opportunity for the media to actually point out that the murder rate for women in prostitution is 40 times that of any other occupation, which is why it shouldn't actually be a valid occupation, but should be understood as a high-risk arena that is something that we should be trying to avoid any women going into. Now, the person who was murdered was not actually in prostitution. However, the fact that he visited a brothel beforehand is actually very relevant information, because men often practice the violence that they're going to commit on prostituted women, and they build up. They use it as a kind of testing ground. What can I get away with? And in Perth, a 10-year-old girl was hung by a rope around her neck from a tree, and she survived the attack. And the media is calling this extreme schoolyard bullying. Well, the correct way of just understanding this is attempted murder. These kids actually hung her from a tree. Yeah. So again, it's, where are they getting these ideas from? Because you go back 20 years and kids were not hanging each other from trees. They were not trying to lynch each other, yeah? And this was a mixture of boys and girls. And I don't understand how we can just call this schoolyard bullying, or even extreme schoolyard bullying. This is the influence of a highly violent culture that is getting to children very young, before they're capable of understanding the impact that violence has. I mean, if you watch TV or video games, somebody gets shot, they get up, they grunt a bit, and, they do the hard man thing, and, then they do the hero thing, and then they get patched up at hospital and everything's okay. In reality, these things don't work like that. But children do not understand that. They believe what they see on TV. So I've got to say, this is something that is worth us looking into, and worth us trying to find a way to, I guess, What is the media's influence on children? Where are they getting it from? And how do we actually allow kids to have a real childhood? Why are we not discussing it? Right, so this is in Indigenous news now. We have former Prime Minister Tony Abbott was appointed as the Special Envoy for Aboriginal Affairs. Now, obviously, this has been met with the extremely obvious reaction of absolute disgust and horror by Aborigines and Torres Strait Islanders and pretty much anybody who's ever heard Tony Abbott speak. The Indigenous Advisory Council was shown no respect on this. They heard about the appointment in media reports. Now, they should have been consulted before any appointment was made. That's the very point of the Indigenous Advisory Council, is that they get a political say in Aboriginal affairs. You know, and this is just part of Australia's absolute fucking ignorance and racism. And to give another example of this, Sunrise did a segment on Indigenous children, and it's now being in court. Actually, been taken to court over this segment on TV, because what they did was they characterised Indigenous families as a danger to their own children, and they advocated for removal of children from their homes. And we've just had, you know, huge apologies in the media for the stolen generations, and then we've got this fucking racist shit on our news that actually wants to do it to the next generation and is trying to justify it by saying that somehow if you're Indigenous, you can't raise a family. Well, shit. You know, how obvious can you get when it comes to racism? And, you know, as per usual, this was white people talking about Indigenous people. So I'm glad it's gone to court, and I hope they're made to, you know, publicly apologise and bloody well pay up too. So, NDIS in New South Wales ordered a woman to pay $100,000 back to them because what happened was she received compensation after she was severely burned. She got third-degree burns in a shower by a carer. And this carer was there because she has cerebral palsy and she can't communicate. So she couldn't actually say, this is what's happening. I'm, you know, in pain. There's hot water. The water's too hot. It's burning me. And somehow the carer didn't notice that she was being scalded to the point of third-degree burns. Now, she got compensation because it ruled in her favour, and that was meant to be, you know, for all of the medical costs and for the trauma. And she will have a hell of a lot of trauma, and without being able to communicate, then that also makes counselling a very difficult experience for her, and that's something that she needs. So NDIS, this is disabilities payments through the social welfare system here, is ordering her to pay them back money because she's now got money, saying that she doesn't need the disability. What a load of bullshit. So anyway, there are actually people opposing this, and this is going on in our courts, and I really hope that this woman wins, because if this sets a precedent that if you get any kind of compensation for harm inflicted upon you, that you no longer need a benefit, then it's another way of keeping people who are already in poverty and already in pain in further poverty and further pain. Okay, we also had two separate attacks on the same bus line of two different 17-year-old girls in Cranbourne, Melbourne. And the attacker has not been found. But what happened was these girls were, one of them was actually on the bus and was attacked on the bus. The guy tried to grab her crotch. The other one was at a bus stop waiting for the bus, and it's on the same bus line. And she punched the guy in the face, and they ended up getting out a knife and stabbing her. So she's gone to hospital. And again, this is a man who is, you know, in his 50s, and he's going after girls who are in school uniform. Shows you the state of, what's happening in Australia. We have this incredible misogyny going on. The next bit of news, I'm going to skip over to New Zealand now. In New Zealand, journalist Barbara Drever went over to Nauru, the Australian detention holding for refugees. And she interviewed refugees and has been detained for the crime of journalism. And we did have a law stating that journalists weren't allowed to interview refugees. However, she got told before she went over there, and this is in writing, that she was cleared to do interviews with refugees waiting to get status and citizenship status in Australia. Yet it was revoked the second she actually started interviewing people, and so she's now in detainment for that. Now, I've put this here as breastfeeding mum criticised for changing her schedule to feed her baby. Actually, I'm talking about the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, who has had critics saying that she shouldn't have changed her schedule for breastfeeding her baby, but she should have gone with another person who was going to the same place. And this was, again, going over to Nauru. But what happened was it ended up costing a little bit extra because she had to get a flight to where she was going. And she stood up to critics and she said, "I'm damned if I did, I'm damned if I didn't." And she's right. If she had put her baby second, people would say that she was not a good mum. If she puts her baby first, they're saying that she's not a good Prime Minister. It's utterly ridiculous, and it's just another sign of absolute misogyny, where women are seen as not capable of doing two things at once. And realistically, that's exactly what she did. She got to where she needed to be on time. She simply altered her schedule very slightly, which was how she was getting there and what time she was leaving. And over in New Zealand, we also have our gender critical and lesbian sisters facing horrendous bullying by rainbow organisations and trans activists on Twitter and through public petition after standing up for the rights as enshrined in law. So there's the Lesbian Alliance over there wrote a letter to Rainbow Orgs asking them to either back lesbians when they say that they have the right to their orientation and to not be called bigots for saying no to penis, just because it's attached to a man who thinks he's a woman or who identifies as transgender, or even a transgender person who has actually had a sex change. They still have the right to say no, and that they shouldn't be called bigots or TERFs or anything else for the saying no. And if these organisations weren't able to do that, to drop the L in the name of honesty, it's a pretty fair enough request, So anyway, the bullying there is so extreme. I was actually kind of shocked when I saw it because, you think that, oh yeah, I've seen it all, have a look at the UK and there's been violence and all sorts of stuff. But this is pretty much politicians, the media, LGBT organisations, liberal feminists, all ganging up on two main radical feminists who have come out publicly. There's others as well, however, they're not public. So we have, people with a hell of a lot of power who have blocked these feminists from getting a printing job done. I mean, we're talking about a $2.50 printing job. That if they'd gone to this particular printer, and a printer had printed this $2.50 job, then they would have had a major source that uses their printing service withdrawing and using another one. I mean, it's at that level which is just so fucking disgraceful. Okay, so now that I'm not reading my notes, I just want to say hello to JLYT and Paint It Black. Are you able to get into the chat? Oh, and Witchy, hi. I'm just going back and having a read because while I was reading the other thing, I couldn't read Capsicum Bombs. Ouch, yeah. Man washed the male involvement. Yeah. And so can you all get in or not? In UK, trans rights activists are saying that sticker women are putting razor blades behind the stickers. Oh, what a load of absolute fucking bullshit. You know, razor blades behind the stickers. This is what the stickers that say women don't have penises. Well, oh, thanks, Witchy. I like your voice. Just trying. Oh, fantastic. I'd love to talk to somebody. Yeah, so this week I actually came in with a lot of information to talk about because it's just been a hell week in the news. It's Halloween candy. Oh, so they get taken down. Oh, I remember razor blades being put in Halloween candy, like, I don't know, it would have been 10 or 15 years ago. Yeah, that's some sick shit right there, though, hey? I don't know. That hanging story is nuts. Yeah, I know. That we've got to ask where the kids get it from. Ah, hello, Painted Black. How are you? Okay, I'll just check my speakers if they're actually on because I'm not hearing you. Oh, there we go.
Hello?
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
Good, yeah. Had a really weird incident about 40 minutes before I started this live stream. And actually had gunshots outside my fucking house, which was really unusual.
Oh God. That's horrendous.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
Where you in close to Victoria's CBD or Melbourne V?
no, I'm about an hour and a half out of the
Oh,
CBD. Yeah, down in
the
the
southeast.
southeast.
Southeast. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a nice area, but it's usually not bad enough to be talking about gunshots happening in the area either, you know.
No, not at all. I mean, my niece is around Reservoir area,
Yeah, I know that area.
and in the news last week there was a guy that had raped who was from Reservoir, who had they caught him. Had raped a woman. There's an echo. I don't know what that is.
Oh, okay. I wonder if it's because I had to turn my speaker up so I could hear you and if the echo's me. It could
No,
be
it's
because
coming from me. Oh, that's better. Oh, it's still there.
ah,
Anyway, yeah, it concerns me that like as soon as I heard where he came from, I just my family's down there, so I just thought, oh Jesus, she's got two children, and but they don't like she was aware of it. She told me that only after the fact. That's the point, though, isn't it?
yeah, it is. You never know beforehand. Yeah.
So yeah, it's becoming a little bit
Really?
prevalent, isn't it? Um,
Yeah, that's the thing. Like the mob of 200 teenagers. It was,
yeah,
I mean, it was in Collingwood just this past.
yeah.
And you're like, what the fuck? How did they get to the point that they think, let's just inflict violence on random strangers and run a car into some people? And where do they get these ideas from? And how do 200 people go along with it?
Mob mentality, that was at a nightclub, wasn't it? They were the rappers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was involving Islander as well as the African community.
Yeah, well, they talked about those two communities, but there was also a hell of a lot of white boys involved as well. They just don't point them out because apparently, white is neutral.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we won't mention them. We'll make that as a given.
Yeah. That we'll only point out, the people that we can sensationalize.
Exactly. Yeah, the media's got a lot to do with this crap, like you mentioned before when you were reading up the items in regard to in reporting things about women and reporting things about refugees. You know, particularly the Nauru. That's still echoing. It's really annoying. The Nauru situation where they have to be absolutely on death's door to get some medical attention, but then they're blaming Australian government is blaming the Nauru government.
Yeah, and they've got an agreement between them, and we all know it.
Yeah.
Nauru can actually really make any decisions without Australian approval, given that they are so reliant on Australia taking in refugees.
Yeah, I know. It's just really sickening because these are human beings, and there's children that have been born on that island and haven't even got off there for the last 5 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
we know that young girls are being raped there, and medical professionals have been gagged.
Yep. Yeah, it's a filthy mess. It's inhumane. And what are the United Nations doing about it? What are the Humanities Commission doing about it? None of them have stepped up and said, "Listen, you're doing the wrong thing. You get those kids off the island now."
Yeah. The United Nations has really taken a back step. It's like they have all these charters, they make a lot of decisions about paperwork, but then they don't step in and do anything.
No.
Like the full decriminalisation of prostitution in New Zealand in 2003 is in direct violation of the Treaty of Waitangi, which is the treaty between England and Maori.
Yeah.
It's been sitting like this for 14 years. It's been pointed out a number of times. It's been taken to the UN a number of times to get them to step in and try and force New Zealand to reverse this legislation. Yet they have said no over and over again, despite it being in clear black and white.
Protests are doing nothing. Is there any protests? Have you seen any lately?
Protests in New Zealand?
Yeah.
No, abolitionists over there get bullied and harassed to the point that they lose their jobs. Even basic rental of property becomes difficult. Rental agencies have pressure applied to them to not rent to these people.
Is there any blacklistings over there? Is there any blacklistings over there? Like when you go to the real estate, they've got a little list of who not to rent to.
Yeah, that does happen. I even know one woman who was actually chased out of New Zealand. This is a survivor of prostitution who spoke out against it. And she was in Queensland because they were bullying her children. She has 6 kids. And she was actually, they tried to get her to be homeless, which would have made her children homeless. Tried to get her back into prostitution that way. She's actually safer in Queensland where, she doesn't even have the safety net of benefits over here.
Really?
Yeah. It's just frightening what happens to anybody who stands for abolition in New Zealand. So there's no protests. It's all being done, by fake name on the internet and through letters to PMs and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a few online friends that are New Zealanders living overseas.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
I think
they
it's
tell
bad in Australia.
me,
We think it's bad in Australia, but New Zealand just takes the cake on this shit.
yeah, it's pretty bad. I mean, they haven't done a terrible lot. They kowtow quite easily to the liberal view of things, but only when the Maoris arc up, they tend to take notice of the Maoris, don't they? They don't take any notice of anything else.
They don't have what, sorry?
They tend to take notice of the Maoris when they arc up about anything. Like, for instance, the Maori transgender is really, really big over New Zealand.
Yeah, it has been for a long time, and also with Samoans in New Zealand. It's because they have Fa'afafine, which is
Yeah,
a good gender, but they never understood themselves as female. They understood themselves as males living the role of women.
yeah,
Completely different thing, and they have a highly gendered society in Samoa. And they, like to have their own cultural space in New Zealand.
right.
It's been like that for a long time, and there was never any issue with that. New Zealanders were really open to Fa'afafine in New Zealand, and it's now become an issue due to the Americanization of trans politics.
Yeah, yeah. The thing is, they dressed like women, but they necessarily didn't say they were actual women.
Yeah, they didn't. Because it was third gender, it was a separate thing, and it also has a lot of rules attached to it. So
Yeah,
it's not straightforward as identity. It's actually something that was, it's the youngest son in a family of no
yep,
daughters. It's very specific.
yep. And then he would pass it on to the next generation of the youngest son. That's what I understood it to be like.
Yeah, yeah, it can be that. It depends on, what sex the children are, how many, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Very, very, it's a strict society in some ways.
it's a
And it's
patriarchal society, the same as everywhere else. It's not actual matriarchal. Samoa.
oh, yeah. Yeah, it's very patriarchal. I mean, women still aren't allowed to own property there or vote. So, I mean, in
Right.
Samoa.
Mm.
But it's also one of the very few cultures in the South Pacific that never had colonization. So, on one hand, you're looking at the sexism as being kind of, it's like, oh my God, that's so backwards. And then you look at the fact that they haven't experienced colonization. It's like, wow, that's pretty incredible,
It is. Yeah, it is. What's the other island near Samoa? Not Fiji,
Tonga?
Tonga. Not the other one. Another one. I can't.
Um, oh, there's the Marshall Islands.
Yeah. I used to have a friend that I knew at a pub, and she was from an island, and she spent a lot of time and married a fella from New Zealand. She moved to New Zealand from the island. I just can't think of the name of the island.
Oh,
Yeah.
for
And
some reason, I'm thinking Tonga, but it's not
yeah,
that.
no, it's another island in that group of islands there.
Right.
Anyway, she's really close to her sisters and her cousins, and she had all boys. Like, she had children. She had all boys basically, and she finally got a girl in the family by I think the eldest boy had about 4 kids to an Australian woman. So she was down saying how the women on the island do most of the work as usual. You know, the parenting, the child bearing, upbringing, the work in the home as well as working outside the home, and they have separate traditions as well, women's traditions. Oh, sorry, I wish I could remember the name of the damn country, or damn island.
Is it Rarotonga?
Say again?
Rarotonga?
No.
No.
It's an island. Huh?
Viti Levu?
No, it's a tourist destination.
Oh, okay. Just trying to think. We've only got 18 countries down here. I should be able to bloody well remember them.
So should I. But I haven't spoken to them once. Anyway.
It is. Yeah, it's at the end of a fairly long day, though. Yeah. Oh, no, it doesn't matter. We can worry about that later. It'll probably come to you just after we.
Yeah, later.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what's happening in your part of Australia? Anything in the news with that?
Oh, I went and saw Jermaine Greer last night.
Oh, how was that?
Yeah, it was good. It was interesting. She's talking on the the consent of how it is in the court systems. So that was the crux of her talk. And then she had Sarah Ferguson, from from ABC, doing the questioning. After she did her talk. She'd been in transit for the last 3 days, she said. Which she heard there were protesters, but no, there was no protesters there at all. We didn't see one. This is in Sydney. This wasn't in Melbourne. Melbourne's tonight, so there might be protesters there. But Sydney last night, there was no protesters, and it wasn't a full auditorium either. And it was basically about, like, we got a little book with our ticket on race. Yeah. I just looking for it.
Yeah, the Melbourne one has sold out, so they will the auditorium, and I highly doubt they'll have protesters, because if I know the Melbourne protesters from the Lib Dems and the sex trade and trans activists here, if it's raining, they don't come out, and tonight it's raining.
Right. Oh, good. They're weak as piss anyway.
Oh, aren't they? Like, Julie Bindel was down here not so long ago, and, the protesters said they were going to turn up to readings, books where she was doing her book launch. Didn't, because it was cold and miserable,
Right.
So have you found that?
Witchy said, I think this one's happening tonight, so it's Melbourne. So it's raining in Melbourne, Witchy. So it probably they'll probably stay in their warm little beds and lounge rooms or in some pub or something. You never know. Some of them might get a bit
keyboard warrior.
Yeah. Bloody hilarious. Yeah, so the little it's only like a little booklet, this one that Jermaine gave. Like it's like a little, I don't know, a tiny little booklet that you get, like if you're traveling, get a little tourist book, like on all the places to go and see. It was like that.
Oh, okay.
It's about, including the notes, it's 92 pages long. So it's
right. So there's actually quite a bit of info in there.
Yeah, and I'll read out, if you like, what she says about joystick or weapon. You know how that was the controversial thing.
Yeah.
There's why are women so afraid of rape? If we stick to the kernel of the offence, it involves the most vulnerable part of a man's body, his penis. Most of the men's fit names for their penises signify weakness and foolishness. Even basketball Steven Adams refers to his famous equipment as junk. More different men use pet names such as Willie, Winkle, Plonker, Podger. Australians use Dick, often in connection with Ed, to mean complete fool. According to Patricia De Rossi's article, Fear of Rape, in the Women's Studies Encyclopedia, women fear rape more than any other violent offence. This intense fear of rape, Rossi says, common amongst a significant majority of girls and women, develops in childhood between the ages of 2 and 12. She reports that women participating in the studies claim to remember hearing parental warnings about stranger danger at very young ages. In the female fear, the social cost of rape, Margaret T. Gordon and Stephanie Rigger say that fully one third of the women in their study reported worrying about rape once a month or more. Others said that the fear of rape is just something that lives in the back of their minds at all times, even when it wasn't present in conscious thought. Another third of the participants claim to never worry about rape, but even so, they took precautions to guard against it. And it goes on to say about what other women say about the biological tool is the penis, and but she also mentioned in her talk last night that I'd be more worried about a knife if a man had a knife than a penis. I think a lot of people also don't fully understand Germaine Greer and where she comes from.
Yeah, I agree with you. A lot of people don't understand her. I think she also chooses her words for inflammatory responses sometimes.
Yeah.
And so she kind of brings it on purpose to get the discussion started.
Yeah. I dare say from watching her last night and listening to her speak, yeah, it was she can be very provocative that way, but she does do it, like you said, to create a conversation because no one wants to talk about it.
Yeah, she is very good at getting conversations going by saying inflammatory things in a way that will be misunderstood on purpose, I reckon.
Yeah.
It's not like she hasn't been writing and speaking for a bloody long time. So she probably knows this art about back to front.
Right. And the other thing is she herself was brutally raped. She was her head was smashed on some piece of furniture or on the ground or something, and she didn't go.
I heard it happened in a car.
It may have been. She didn't go to great detail last night because she wasn't. I think she was also. She said her head wasn't her head wasn't completely not there, but it was. She was sleep deprived, I dare say.
Yeah, most likely. Yeah, I personally find some of the things she had to say about that, I didn't go to the talk, but when she was talking about rape in the media,
Yeah.
and said it in a really bad way, but
Yeah.
saying was, look, the system we've got's not working.
Yeah.
Juries don't want to convict men because they're afraid of false rape claims and consider that these to be the normal when in actual they're very rare.
Yeah.
So we need a different approach. Maybe they're more likely to find a man guilty if there are fines instead of jail terms. And Now, if you apply that to first offence only, and then a criminal history that can actually be used, to say, look, we can't give him a fine this time, we've got to put him in jail, then maybe as a long-term plan, she's actually got a point.
Yeah, she did center her talking about rape with men. She centered men in her discussion, which was really, it surprised me because she said, well, then it was almost like she said, oh, poor men and poor, because we don't know what trauma they've been through. And I was sitting there thinking, am I hearing all right? Like poor men, like these men overpower women. Men stalk women. And she said you're more likely to get hurt at home because she was talking about statistically that's where women are abused at home, in the home.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is the point.
I once heard that it was between 10 a.m. and midday in your own home by someone you know and trust.
Yeah. But we also see in the media, we don't see that so often. We see the women that are hurt on the street. What about that poor Australian woman that was married to the Irish guy? What was her name? She was attacked and raped on the street from a serial rapist who was on parole.
Yeah, it was Jill Meir. She was,
Jill Meir, yeah.
and she was something like around 2 minutes from home when walking from a bus stop to her house. And she had got on the phone and said, I'm almost there, safe and sound. And then it happened between the end of that phone call and been 2 minutes to get home.
Yeah. And he dragged her into a laneway off the street.
Yeah, of course he did, because he wouldn't do it in public.
Yeah.
Yeah, we hear that because it fits the narrative of stranger danger.
Yeah. Well, these things we hear about the ones that are in public and that are snatched and taken to some, bush setting or, we hear mainly about that because apparently the men that do it in the homes are not guilty or are subject to the woman being questioned as to why he did that to her.
And people saying things like it takes two to tango.
Yeah, they don't take the woman's word for it. She was saying that the woman is evidence and not the victim. She's used because it's taken into the patriarchal system, such as the court system, which is the state entry to the patriarchy, which is also then used, the state using the woman as evidence and not as a victim. So she's the one that's being questioned.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, what I find really interesting is if it happens in the home, we still have this division as though it's somehow not as bad because it was her partner or her husband or her uncle or, somebody she knew and it was behind closed doors. And somehow this makes it not as bad as if it was, the horrible, evil monster on the street. And realistically, if you're going to get hurt, it's going to hurt more if it's somebody you trust, because...
Yeah, that's what she was saying.
Yeah, because afterwards, I mean, this is with people who survive it, because you're going to have to deal with the physical assault no matter what. But for the person who knew and trusted the offender, they've also got to deal with their own perception of who to trust and whether they can trust themselves to be able to tell, who is who. And the truth is, these guys don't have rapist tattooed on their forehead,
Mm. So the interesting thing she says here at the end of the thing about joystick or weapon, she says here, men misperceive women's reactions during sex because their penis gives them so much pleasure, it's difficult for them to imagine that it's not doing anything for the recipient of their attentions. We are not surprised to find men expressing the opinion that women get pleasure from being raped. It is more depressing to find that more than a few contributions to online discussions purport to come from women who have enjoyed being raped, some of whom claim that the only time they've experienced orgasm was in the course of rape. She went on also to say in the talk that women have rape fantasies. Some of us might feel that is really hard to believe, but I know for a fact a woman has told me that she wanted to be raped, and I'm like, what?
I think it's really, personally, I believe it's mislabeled. I don't think it should be called rape fantasy.
No.
In your imagination, no matter what it is you're imagining, you are in control of every single detail. Whereas the very point of rape is that you have no control at all and something is being done to you. So the fantasy is not rape. The fantasy is the man who is, attractive, who can practically mind read and is going to pleasure the woman exactly how she wants it. That's not a rape fantasy. It's a fantasy of the perfect man and the relinquishing of control.
Right.
And also of responsibility for the sex itself. Where the reason that he does all this to her rather than it's a participant is that she gets to fantasize and have no responsibility for where it goes. And in fantasy, you can imagine acts that you may not necessarily want to do in real life as a sexual exploration that is in absolute safety.
Yeah, because you supposedly trusting the person to carry out that fantasy without attacking you or hurting you, maiming you, assaulting you.
Yeah. JLYT has said we fantasize our fears to understand and overcome them, and that's true. I mean, how else do you work through difficulty and, bad experiences, fears that we've been taught to have as well?
Right.
Actually going into your mind and playing it out.
Yeah. And we've also been taught as young women that our fantasies are dirty, that our fantasies are lame. We only want to do fantasies to please the male. And I'm like, well, no, lots of women, single women have fantasies, and they masturbate to their fantasies.
Yeah. And we also don't really know what female sexuality would look like outside of a patriarchal structure.
Exactly.
We know how it's responding to subjugation and the centering of the penis as being the only thing that matters in terms of pleasure. So when we start exploring what does my pleasure mean, it's still going to be through the male gaze.
Yeah, I guess so. It depends though on what sexuality the woman is.
I think even for lesbians, because I'm bisexual and so I've had sex with women as well. And you still have the influence of misogyny, patriarchy, and the centering of the male orgasm as the only thing that matters. And so even women who sit outside of sex with men at all still have the setup of masculinity and femininity in not an equal space, but rather the masculine aspect being centered.
What if they're two feminine women that have not had that influence per se?
In and of themselves, yeah, sure, but the culture, you're still not divorced from culture in the way that it's.
Oh, I see where you're coming from. Yeah, you're still brought up with the patriarchy. You're still brought up with everything outside of what your sexuality is centering male.
Yeah. So, the exploration of sex is still going to be through the idea of, this is the way it's meant to look. This is what is understood as sex. This, female pleasure is understood as foreplay, as a runner-up to the main event. So I think, even for lesbians, even if they are both more akin to traditional feminine ways and roles and presentation and all that stuff, there's still a huge hurdle to overcome to discover self.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, and so I still think that no matter what our orientation is, there's just a long way to go for women to discover a true female sexuality outside of patriarchy. And maybe some women have, but as a class, I don't think we're there.
Yeah, did you ever hear about the woman's land and her land up in New South Wales by any chance?
I've heard a little bit about it, that it exists, but I don't really know much about it at all.
Well, that still is going on. That still is around, but a lot of women have not stayed on the land there. I'm actually interested in going up. There's a woman going up from Sydney there in the next week or two. She's a lesbian separatist, and she was at the talk last night. But I didn't cite her. I've only met her once.
Yeah.
I find that we might have to start doing stuff like that if things get far worse. I think make our own places.
Yeah, and especially now that you've also got this whole, the biggest rise in homelessness is amongst women over the age of 60.
Yeah.
So having women's land can even just be a basic safety net for women to have a space to actually live somewhere.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the superannuation that is available to women is not less than men.
Yeah, it's something like about 1/3 less, and I saw a statistic saying that on average Australian women earn $240 less per week than Australian men.
Yep, it's that's also to do with the pay gap.
Yeah,
There's,
and more women in casual positions and part-time positions.
yeah, which he's just said community building, which is a great idea, I think.
Yeah, it's also becoming harder and harder. I mean, we're living in the second most expensive country in the world for home ownership now.
Yep.
Yeah, I can't remember. Japan used to be the first, but it's actually slipped down. I can't remember who's first on the list now. But yeah, I know Sydney's worse than Melbourne, but Melbourne's.
They were touting on TV last week that the real estate prices have gone down at least 5% as opposed to what this time last year was. So
Is that for the whole of Australia or for Sydney alone?
New South Wales?
Right.
But see,
It was outrageous.
the media actually, believe it or not, the media drives the house pricing.
Okay. I didn't know that. I've seen the links between outside investors, mostly from China and America, where they pay exorbitant prices for housing, which raises the, average price for housing and really just prices Australians out of the market. But I have noticed media influence.
Yeah, that's true, media. How else would they know about it?
Yeah, true. But I'm just wondering about, I guess less direct influences and, you know, because obviously the real estate agents will advertise overseas, and they don't advertise here at all. I know about that, but you know, that's advertising rather than media reporting.
JL was saying Denmark has more home ownership, whereas before it had a strong commune culture, particularly in Copenhagen.
Oh, okay. Denmark's in Perth. It's not in
Denmark, as in Denmark.
Oh, Denmark over there. I was thinking of Denmark in Western Australia because it's a tiny town. And I was thinking, oh, I know somebody living there. But no, Copenhagen, of course.
So what else in your notes would you like to discuss?
I'm pretty open to discussing anything. Yeah, because I just went through the notes and I actually read out all of them, and it was just sort of something to have, I guess something for me to say while I was waiting for people to join in, and if there was anything in there that other people found interesting and wanted to add to.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed like the bullying of the New Zealanders has just got really, really bad. There was the posters of the suffragettes, and it was just quotes and pictures of the suffragettes for celebrating 125 years of women being able to vote. And phantom bill stickers is the main, place, the main people who put up posters all over New Zealand. They've cornered the market. They refused to do it because they got a couple of complaints from trans activists saying that these quotes were transphobic because they mentioned sex.
Oh.
So that happened. And then another activist group has, gone against the lesbian group that's, with the LGBT organisations saying either back us or drop us, one of the two. And they've used that to start a fundraiser for their own stickers and their own posters, which they're going to be slapping over New Zealand from the top to bottom. And they managed to raise enough money to do 2,000 of these fucking things, and they did it in 2 days. And they through slander.
That's disgusting.
Yeah. Instead of saying pro-lesbian rights, they called it an anti-trans group.
Of course they did.
Yeah. So I actually wrote a complaint to them, and I outright said this is in violation of the legal protections in New Zealand, because it is. Lesbians are legally protected from slander and harassment on the basis of orientation.
Right.
And I pointed to the United Nations Charter of Human Rights, which actually has enshrined in it that every group has the right to fight on their own behalf politically. And, New Zealand has signed this, so has Australia. Neither have ratified, but both have signed it. So there is an obligation to try and live up to those principles. And they've taken that down now. But I don't know if it's to do with the fact that they could actually be held to account legally for what they said, or whether it's because they got the money that they wanted in 2 days.
Right. So we're talking about the gender critical and lesbian sisters you got at the bottom of your notes. The horrendous bullying.
Yeah. Yeah. Them and a blogger and gender critical radical feminist who is not lesbian. It's been to her specifically targeted. One of the gender critical lesbian alliance women who has been specifically targeted, and then the group as a whole has been misrepresented.
Right. That's pretty bad.
Yeah, it is. And they seem to have been getting away with this shit because nobody is taking them up on the violations by law that they've actually, been guilty of. They could by rights, these women could take them to court and win.
Right, but they need the money to get the court proceedings happening, because it's going to involve barristers.
Yeah, it's extremely expensive, and they don't have the funds. They'd have to do something like, crowdfunding, which again is damn difficult to do. And even finding a site that will allow crowdfunding for that, because you've got your trans activists just, often what they'll do is they'll shut it down.
Yep, like they are doing everywhere across the Western cultures.
Yeah. Oh, I know another topic that could actually relate to this. The Pussy Church of Witchcraft?
Yes, I'm a member of.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. Because, there's been a lot of debate amongst radical feminists whether this is a positive or a negative. And personally, I like the idea. I think, it gives a basis for tax exemption. It gives a basis for protection as a religious organisation.
Right. I'm not a religious person by any means, but I like the fact that the charter is about holding space for women and being able to say it's women only without being uh, charged under the Discrimination Act.
Yeah.
That, I believe Kathy Brennan had a lot to do with getting that legally worded.
Yeah.
She's a lawyer. She's in
Okay.
yeah, she's in Baltimore, Massachusetts, and yeah, her and a few other women started it.
Yeah. I'm not religious either, but I can see the reason behind doing a church specifically to protect female space, to be protected by law, and have the right to speak, and to gather.
To congregate as because they've got Wicca, and Wiccan and spirituality and that sort of thing, as in using that as their crux of what the church is about. It's not per se one particular thing. It's about women's spirituality and how we describe that ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been part of Wiccan circles before, since the 1990s, and I see no problem with women exploring spirituality in an all-female space. And so many of these covens and Wiccan groups now are starting to let trans in. So,
Yeah.
for women who are part of the Wiccan tradition, they've been pushed out and marginalised further and further, and really needed this as well.
Well, just recently that happened in the States. They had a convention going on, and it was, I wish I could recall exactly what it was called. I'd have to look on my Facebook, but it was actually
what was her name? Max somebody.
yeah, Max Dashu.
That's the one. Yeah. She was no platformed at a Wiccan space.
Yeah.
She has, what is it? Something like 30 or 40 years of writing and research behind her, and she's no platformed by these new to it young fucking trans activists.
Correct. And what they did was they wrote into this place that they were holding over the weekend. It was like a convention of sorts, and there was workshops happening, and they asked Max to speak. There's going to be talks given over the weekend, and trans activists contacted the group and said, no, she's a known TERF. And
She did the Pride Parade, and didn't she?
yeah. Oh, the girls that were attacked, I've got friends on my Facebook. In that parade, the two main girls that were attacked, and some of them I'm not on Twitter, and they were saying after they got home from that parade, they put on Facebook what was happening to them, and I'm like, oh my God, you know. And so because Max Dashu was met them earlier before the parade started, she met up with them for the first time and walked with them. But she said she advised them not to take signs that are provocative, because you're gonna, you know, get a whole manner of hell. But I'm of a different thought, that they should be able to have any signs that they want, because it is a joint march, and none of them were actually that provocative at all. It was mainly centred on lesbianism and lesbians, and they had pictures of their heroes.
Yeah. And also, I saw people, you know, commenting that the original Dyke March, the whole point of it was protest.
Yeah.
And what these women did was they brought it back to its roots, and they protested lesbophobia, which is, you know, perfectly what that march is meant to be about.
Right. It was so that because we weren't being invited enough, our visibility in the main parades over there was you know, petering out, because lesbians didn't want to be you know, they wanted to be in the parade, but they were not given opportunities to do the things that they wanted to do. So they just decided to go, well, no, we're going to do something apart from the parade, and we're going to do a march so that our visibility is seen, because you're not allowing us to do things, or we're not being represented.
Yeah.
Which is true of what happened.
So much erasure at the moment. You know, it's not just erasure in the marches, it's erasure in the language, you know, the queering of lesbianism,
Yep.
and erasure through the transing of lesbians. So, and their partners as well, because, you know, the partner transitions, and so they have to change their orientation to either be bi or het or queer.
Yeah, but that's, you know, factually not right, because of the trans language, it's not actually factually right, is it? It's
Not at all.
It's a woman pretending to be a male, or being more comfortable looking like a man.
Yeah, but she's still a woman, and they're still in a relationship. It's, you know, the erasure is just on every single level.
And it's putrid.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, this is one of the reasons that I'm also thinking, yeah, I'm non-religious, but I can back this particular church, because they're giving space, and they're also giving visibility back.
Yeah. The other thing is, it's a legally they're able to do it. That's where it's happening, that legalities are stopping us from doing that, because we're getting attacked.
Yeah.
And they're not listening.
Oh, especially in New South Wales, with that bill that went through with the amendment to the Crimes Act 1900, and the now, what was it? There was 2 amendments from 1947 or something that were taken out, with this thing replacing them. And it's all about communication. So speech, written text, social media. And if a person feels harmed by it, then they're calling this hate speech and threatening language. And the groups that are protected can take that to court, and the person can be imprisoned for up to 3 years. But none of it's actually on serious vilification, incitement to violence, or actual violence and measurable harm. So, something that's actually violent can get 3 years, which is actually a reduced sentence from what it used to be, whereas somebody who says something that someone else doesn't like could end up in jail for 3 years as well. So I think we actually need those legal protections, like we need the pussy church.
Yeah, and that's preposterous what they did. Absolutely preposterous, because if you're saying something is violent, you're saying that that's violence. The spoken word is violence. That's what they're saying.
Yeah, and
which is what
that it can be on your own home, and that they don't have to prove actual harm. They only need to state that they've been harmed.
Yeah. What the fuck is that?
Yeah.
So, if I go to, what have we got coming up in November? International Women's Day? That's March, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, I think. Oh, there'll be something in November.
Hey?
There'll be something in November.
Well, that Dennis J. Riley, he lives in my town now.
Yeah, that bastard moved here.
Yeah. So I was kind of looking forward to seeing him out and about. He's 6'3" or 4 or something.
Mm.
And I was kind of hoping to protest very closely by him. And then I thought there was something in November that we had, not Women's Day, not International Women's Day, March. What is it?
I don't know. Do a quick Google.
Anyway, I was like, because he came here like June. Was it June or May or something like that? He arrived here with his, his over his international relationship with the girl here. And not long after we got here, he exclaims that he's now in a polyamorous relationship. So basically, he's like, "Oh, the boys are wonderful over here. I think I'll try." And told her, "Sorry, love, I'm not going to be exclusive." What a fucking.
I'm wondering whether she just couldn't have a bar of him anymore.
Yeah, true. Well, let's hope that's the case, really.
Although I've heard that she's just as bad as he is with all this.
No, exactly. I'm not really. I don't really give a shit, to tell you the truth. But the fact that he arrives here and then tells everyone that he's polyamorous is like, it's so see-through.
Yeah, and also on top of that, he's just going to use it as another form of so-called oppression, when they say that he's oppressed on the basis of his polyamory.
So he's around. I believe he's in the eastern suburbs. That's what I found out so far. Bondi way.
Oh, okay. Right. No, that's pretty swanky, Bondi.
Yeah. Well, that's where the New Zealanders used to hang out. Remember?
Yeah, used to, but I mean nowadays, you've got to be fairly healthy to live there.
Yeah, well, a 2-bedroom apartment there's at least $800 a week.
Yeah, and that would be a cheap one for that area, because even going back 5 years, because I was living in Sydney 5 years ago.
All right.
And yeah, just getting a room in a flat somewhere, you're looking at $350 minimum for a real shit dive,
Yeah. So anyway, I'm chomping at the bit, waiting for an opportunity to stir that little piece of shit up.
Yeah. Yeah, you please call him Dude Bro if you do bump into him.
What?
Call him Dude Bro. Hey.
Oh, that apple really is big, isn't it?
Oh, hell, he'd probably take you to court for misgendering him.
Oh, of course he would. I'd do it on the. I couldn't care less. I'd still do it. Well, watch this space.
Yeah. Well, it's not like he'd know your name or, how to get that started anyway, so.
Yeah.
Just call yourself Jane Smith, What's your name?
Jane Farmer.
Police. Yeah.
Oh, God.
And my pronouns are, I don't give a fuck.
Not really. Not around you.
Yeah. Oh, God. There's that in RMIT, they just did this whole thing of getting all of the tutors and, researchers and stuff to have to learn how to use gender-neutral language.
Yes.
Students as he, she, or anything like that. I mean, what a fucking waste of taxpayers' money and resources,
It's incredible. It's really starting to hype up here in Australia. Have you noticed?
Yeah.
It's really starting to hype up now. They've infiltrated.
Yeah. And for so few of them, they've really got into positions of power.
Mm. Like the girls down in Melbourne, that was harassed by that little prick. What was his name? I'm terrible. I can't remember. I know what I'm talking about, but I can't, recall names. So pardon me. They put the video up on Facebook about he was harassing them, and then all the sex workers surrounded them as well. Then the union guys came in on it. This was International Women's Day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's when it became a little bit more prevalent. And that guy up in Brisbane, the Greens guy, who's going for Rip. That woman called Beth Rip.
Yeah. Yeah.
Taking her to the Human Rights Commission.
Yeah, she's in round 1, which is good.
Yeah.
Round 2's on its way, and this fucking Bridget bullshit tranny is now also taking a man to the Human Rights Commission as well, who's based in Melbourne.
Really?
Saying misgendering shit and other such things. I mean, he's a radical feminist ally, but mostly he's behind, decolonization and Indigenous rights and anti-porn. That's his main 2 focus.
Right.
He even really talks about trans issues. He
Right.
just sort of backs women up a bit,
Yeah. Wow. So he's got a bloke in trying to get a bloke in trouble as well.
Yeah.
The whiny, bitchy little prick, that bloke. Have you seen him? I looked him up a couple of months ago. He's really quite a nasty little bastard.
JLYT's just said they use feminist tactics of gaining power. Just wondering what that means. Like, I know that they, they use language and change it. They, what would you call it? They kind of appropriate, but I'm not sure what it means by using feminist tactics to gain power or of gaining power.
Yeah, what feminist tactics is that?
Yeah, I'm just wondering. So maybe you'd like to expand on that, JLYT. Give her a chance to do a bit of typing there. Because, yeah, you can join back in if you want to. I know we were fairly engrossed in the convo before, and I saw you saying you didn't want to interrupt it, but feel free to come back in. Yeah. No, it's sort of amazing what's happened to Beth. I just kind of, you know, she is a journalist, she is in the media, and she does have a platform to some extent, but she's never said anything hateful. Like, I've been following what she says on social media for a long time now,
Okay.
and I've never seen her say anything hateful. What she says is, the radical feminist position in a very careful way. Like, she's not near as blunt as a lot of radical feminists are.
Yeah. She's diplomatic.
Yeah, that's the word. Yeah.
Yeah. She's smart.
Yeah.
Smart cookie. She's not, it's not her first rodeo.
Well, no, it's not, but it is sort of one of the more extreme things, like to be taken to the Human Rights Commission. And this fucking little bastard tried to sue her for something like $50,000 or
Yeah, they would have laughed at him. So they settled on, oh, okay, she can do an apology. So she gives him a one-line apology. Oh,
yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, he's claiming it's not good enough.
Yeah, I know. Fuck you, you. Fuck you.
It's narcissistic rage.
Yeah, yeah. The guy's a simpleton anyway. He's not really that fucking smart. He's all about getting his 15 minutes of fame by being a part of the Greens Party, and he's not doing a terrible lot. He shows up in his frocks, and that's about it.
Yeah,
and minces around. He's another military person too. He's another service person.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah.
So most likely an autogynephile.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Hmm.
Funny how majority of them are.
Yeah, I've been reading a bit about autogynephilia lately, and apparently it's just them getting off on the idea of themselves as a woman, and
Been around for years. There's just a new word for it.
yeah,
Yeah.
and many of them aren't even happy after they've had sex change surgery and all that kind of stuff and detransitioned back because that was never actually what was going on in the first place.
Right. Well, transvestites, right? They most of them kept their penises, right? They just got breast implants. Okay, and they're autogynephiles.
Yeah, some of them will be. Yeah, it's a really interesting kind of phenomena that, I don't know if you know about sissification porn, but guys watch that and they start getting off on the idea of being subjugated.
Yeah.
Apparently, this is meant to make them female if they get dominated and, told to, wear that dress and put on those heels and kiss my feet and all this kind of crap.
Yeah, that's what we do. That's what we're like.
Oh yeah,
we're all
do that every day. You've got to wonder where they get these ideas of women from, because I mean, what, have they never met an actual woman?
I think they get it off porn mainly. I think they get their ideas from the 50s as well. Women being subservient to the male, getting everything in place, making sure she looks the part for when he gets home. Has his beer chilled or his cocktail made.
Yeah. But women don't behave like this in life. I mean, these guys had mothers. Some of them have sisters. Many of them have been married. They've got kids. You know, they know this is a bullshit fantasy in their heads.
Yeah. Yeah. It is porn. It's predominantly porn, which you're right. It's predominantly porn. But a lot of their ideas come from the 50s, where women are subservient. Women were the man's maid,
Yeah.
especially in Australian culture.
His maid, you know, his feet rubber, his cook, his housemaid. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
It's almost like being, you know, a slave in some ways. A slave to an idea of what does a man need. Oh, quick, you better preempt it before he has to say it. You know? Yeah.
And woe betide you if you say the wrong thing, you know, you get a backhander.
Yeah. And these guys don't want that actual role. What they want is the play pretend.
Yeah.
As soon as they've finished playing pretend, they want to actually have the dominance they've always had.
Exactly.
Yeah. I actually read one thing from a transgender activist about autogynephilia, actually. And some guy actually went into great detail about why and how it is these guys think that they're a woman. And what he said was they first start off with just like, you know, looking at women's clothes and fantasizing. Then they'll like, you know, get a pair of frilly knickers out and masturbate into them. And then they'll wear some stockings under their, you know, pants at work or something. And they've been doing this behavior for like 20 years. And it's then to them, they've got a split personality where this woman has been living, you know, through their masturbation for 20 years. And the woman personality takes over when they come out and they've got to tell somebody the secret. So they tell the wife or the girlfriend. And then they start getting bolder and start wearing women's clothes out in the streets. And then they're like, oh no, this is my real personality. This is me being my true self.
Yeah.
It's the progression. It's that long to get to that point.
Yeah.
And I found that interesting because I could actually understand the mind fuck behind it, you know?
Yeah. And it's also lies. Like there's a lot of lies that they incorporate in their testimonials because they want to be believed. They want to be validated. And the only way of doing that is to make the story sound good.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that was another thing he said is that they start rewriting history.
Right.
So instead of, you know, they had this fetish at puberty coming on and they were masturbating into knickers. It's, oh, I always had a feminine personality and I always, you know, felt like a woman. And that's not actually what happened, but they've rewritten.
Yeah, because it sounds better, and because they get sympathy, and because they get a notoriety in claiming that they've been doing this for years, in claiming that I've had to suppress my true feelings when it wasn't it was more of a fetish. They don't say fetish because it doesn't. It sounds, you know, suspect. So they say feeling. It's like transgenderism is feeling. I felt like this when I was a child. Like, well, you're a man. How the fuck did you feel like a woman, you dipshit?
Yeah. And how many people need to have hormone surgery and coming out and, you know, all of that bullshit in order to be their true selves? I mean, what is this true self? Because, like, when I think of who am I, you know, it's a constantly evolving experience. And there is no one way that's true self and other ways that aren't. It's just what is right in this moment.
Yeah. See, they lack the capacity to really be in touch with themselves and accept themselves and continue that journey as a person. As a they're not even honest to themselves. So how can they possibly be honest to anybody else?
Yeah.
They're living a lie. They're a walking, talking lie.
And they know it's a lie, which is why they need this constant validation from
Correct.
everyone around them.
Correct. I've seen many, many transgenders over the years in the States, in Thailand. I've met them, spoke with them, had a drink with them, and had a real raw chat with people.
Yeah.
And even hermaphrodites. I've met two hermaphrodite. One was from Brisbane, and one was from Sydney. And one went into the Dykes on Bikes that I was organising here for years. And she phoned me from Brisbane, the one from Brizzy, and she said, is it okay if I, come down and join? I said, of course it's okay. And she came up, she said, oh, hi, I'm such and such. And I said, yeah, hi, nice to meet you. And I looked at her and I just thought, oh, wow, you're a very masculine looking woman. And instead of keeping that to myself, I said that out loud. And I didn't actually mean to actually say it out loud. I have a foot and mouth problem on most occasions. But and she said, yes, well, actually, I'm a hermaphrodite. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, and that was what I was going to ask you. Where can we get, because she didn't come, dressed as what she was going to be dressed like when she was riding with us into the parade. She came, just in civvy clothes. And she said, is there anywhere where we can get dressed? I said, we can try because we were in a car park next to the Leichhardt Hotel. And,
Yeah.
and I said, we could try, the toilets there. And I said, there's only two toilets. They were the old style wood, cement brick, two stalls type. I said, and there's no real good mirrors or anything in there either. I said, so, you'll have to go on what see yourself and like from your shoulders up. She goes, oh, that's okay. And I said, some of the girls are getting dressed here in the car park. They're just putting up towels around each other and just, changing their jeans and that to their, corsets or stockings or whatever.
Yeah.
And he goes, oh, I'll do that. I said, yeah, sure, fine. And I did say he because it was looking like she was looking like a he, but she also identified as a woman. So I'm like, oh, I didn't mean to call you he. And she says, that's all right. I get that all the time. I said, it's okay. I said, well, I'm going to try and remember you as a she because it is Dykes on Bikes after all, right? She said, yeah, right. And she said, I've got my girlfriend here. Would you like me to introduce her? I said, yeah, I'd love that. Great. So they both rode down on Harleys. And, she got dressed and undressed in the car park with all the women around. But it wasn't like she had, a 6-inch bloody penis sticking out. You know what I mean?
No. Yeah, it's a different condition entirely. It's not a man transing to a woman. It's being born intersex, isn't it?
Yeah, but she was a true hermaphrodite where she did have a penis. It was a small penis. It wasn't a big penis.
Yeah.
And she had a vagina. She said, did you want to have a look at it? And I went, no, thanks. I said, no. I said, no, thanks. Just, off you go. She said, well, if you're curious, you haven't seen it before, I thought maybe you might want to look at it. I went, no.
I'm sure she's had a lot of people want to see it, like, oh my God, what does that look like, So that's probably why.
But I just thought, how bloody, that was hilarious. Like, she offered me
Yeah.
to, it's like, well, she had a bit of I mean, a little bit of what do you call it? What's the word? Exhibitionism about her. And she
Yeah,
looked fantastic. She did. She looked fantastic.
right. Yeah, I'm just imagining she's just so used to people being curious and asking, and just got to the point of like, well, do you want to see it?
Yeah. Oh God. And I kept it to myself. I never told anybody that who she was, in respect to her sex genitals. And
Yeah,
and she came up to me after the parade. Like we all went back to the Leichhardt afterwards. And this was back in '92, I think. 92, 91, something near 92. And I was living in Leichhardt at the time anyway. So it was really like she was lovely, really lovely, lovely person. And it was the days it was called the Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras.
right. Yeah, I think I went to one way back when it went through like Potts Point, King's Cross area. I think in the 90s sometime.
No, we never went through there, Dale. That was the early part. That was 1978 where we were fighting for our rights. We
Uh,
all we
went
we were
around
going
then.
up Elizabeth Street, up Liverpool, onto Oxford, down Flinders, and then onto in front of the old showgrounds. So that's
No,
and before that, we lined up at the the um, the museum, the art museum.
right.
We lined up in College Street around the art museum and
I
came up Oxford.
remember way back in the 90s, I went to one, but yeah, the last one that I went to was 5 years ago, but the very first one I ever went to was in the 90s. But back then I used to do a lot of drugs, so it's quite likely that I don't have a clue. Um,
We all. And back when they
I
were,
remember it was very different.
yeah,
The feeling of the whole thing, like it was a lot more women in the 90s than it
yes,
was in the last one that I went to. And I was just looking at that going, this is all men. We've got
yeah,
police, we've got the military. It's very, very different.
yeah. We used to have the women marches in the Xena Warriors. We had the lemon, the lemons, the girls all in yellow with the lemon slice on top of their head on the helmet. Uh,
Right.
we even had the lesbian counselling line um, on a float, like use a truck, and had the girls with telephone lines and telephones on the truck.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. It used to be more inclusive. Now it's very male centered and what
corporate.
yeah, corporate driven. It's
Yeah,
really fucked up and weird compared to what it used to be. Like it was far more, I guess, against the mainstream. It was protest. There was reason for it. There were issues that were being announced, around that time. This is coming up because of this, this, this. Now it's all just like, oh, we're so queer, we're so weird,
yeah,
um, while being very, as you said, corporate.
yeah. And it's also given way to uh, the indigenous folks that came down from Maningrida, uh, just off around the coastline from Darwin. 2 years ago, they came down and called themselves the Sister Girls. And
Oh, okay.
yeah, and I went to meet up with some girls that were in the northern that I knew from the 80s and have moved up to northern New South Wales on the coast. And we're all very we're champions for Indigenous cultures and Indigenous gay and lesbian young people and adults, and they came down to perform at one of the Mardi Gras
Oh,
events. And these are men with just lipsticks on, and yeah, none of them have got actual breasts. None of them are taking estrogen per se.
and no actual women.
Yeah.
Shit. Okay. Yeah. So again, not actually inclusive. I mean, it's good to have Indigenous groups, obviously, but you would want them to actually be inclusive.
Yeah.
Just going insane.
Yeah. I won't go to Mardi Gras anymore. I don't have anything to do with it because it's not my community. It's actually shunned me. Even the dykes and bikes have shunned me and told lies about me, spread rumours about me. So much so that they've even altered their web page to lie about the time that I started it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, they're really quite a nasty bunch of women. Very, very wanting to get their 15 seconds of fame and ignore history of how it started.
Yeah, and that's kind of, it seems ridiculous because part of all of this again was getting, visibility. And
Yeah.
that was visibility for right now, it was visibility for gay and lesbians in history.
Yeah.
So you rewrite history and you're actually going against the very point of, what it was started for.
Yeah, it was almost like it started off with these two girls that I got. See, I did it by myself for years, and it was getting really big, and I was handling it, but I didn't need help.
Yeah.
That echo is really bad.
Right. Well, we should probably end up winding up anyway because it's getting close to 2 hours of live stream. Yeah, I was originally going, oh, let's just do an hour, but then I've let these go for 2 hours because I thought we really only just start gearing up about the hour mark, and the conversation in the second hour tends to be more interesting.
Let's go. That's the way it goes sometimes. But
Yeah.
it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thank you for joining me. And yeah, please do again. It happens once a week and it goes on the, now what's the order? It goes Sunday, Thursday, Saturday, Wednesday. And the reason that we shifted it on different days for each of the weeks of, the month was so that if people can't make it on the weekend, but they can on the evening, or if they can't make it on an evening, they can on the weekend. It's just to be able to give opportunity for everyone to make it.
Oh, great idea. Well
Yeah.
done.
Yeah, so I think the next one will be on the Saturday of the next week, not this coming Saturday.
Right. Well, it might be your microphone that's doing the echoing.
It could be you, it could be me. Yeah, it's one of those things that because I'm very new at learning how to do these live streams, I don't know how to identify the problems yet.
Yeah, right. Fair enough.
Yeah, it's kind of a miracle that I actually managed to get the link correct for people to be able to join me at all.
You did good. You did real good.
Thanks for that. And thanks everyone for coming and listening. And remember, you can join in. It's okay to interrupt conversations and say, "Hey, I'm joining in too."
Yeah, great idea. That's the way.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I'll hang up the call now.
Okay.
See
See
ya.
ya.